Okay. All right. Yeah, it looks like we have participants jumping in right now. Welcome, folks. What we like to do when we kick off our webinars is wait just a moment for latecomers to jump in so they don't miss too much. So we'll pause here for another 20 seconds or so and then we'll dive in. So while we're waiting, Eric, you're in Fresno. I know that because you and I work together. I'm up in Sacramento. And Paul, where's home base for you?
I'm in Richmond, California, which is next town to Berkeley.
Yeah, okay, so we've got an all California crew for our
Yeah.
continuity webinar today. That's fun. Um,
Is it raining there? It's raining here.
Mm.
oh, I was just checking the radar and it's on its way. So,
We're, we're good so far.
yeah. Just watching the participant count. Yeah, we've got a pretty good group today. So I'm gonna wait another 10 seconds and then I'll kick things off. Make sure I have my slides ready to go here. Oh, you know what I should do is I should just start so that everybody knows they're at the right web. There we go. Okay. All right. You all seeing my slide okay there?
Yep.
Yep.
That's us. That's us. All right. Well, let's get into it. I'd like to welcome everybody to our webinar today. We're excited to make this happen. We try to do a webinar for Kuali Ready about every couple of months or so. And there's a lot of product demos, and we have a lot of testimonials from our customers sharing their experience using Kuali Ready. But this one's a little different. We're actually kind of going back to the origins of Kuali Ready, and I'm excited to have Paul Dimond here with us today. He's the original creator of Kuali Ready from, gosh, a long time ago, a while back, at the dawn of BCP software, really. He was one of the early pioneers in the field of continuity planning software, and it naturally was a perfect fit for higher education. And so he'll be sharing his experience today with Kuali Ready and his journey in the world of business continuity planning. Super quick introduction for me. My name is Paul Smith. I am the Director of Marketing here at Kuali. So I help organize these webinars and host as best as I can. With me today is Eric Self. Eric is our account executive for Kuali Ready, but also a former Kuali Ready customer and user. He was for a number of years with the um, Fresno Pacific University and helped manage their continuity plans. And as I mentioned, Paul Dimond is with us today, and he'll be sharing his insights. Paul, maybe you can help with your introduction a little bit. Tell us a little bit more about your background and history.
Sure, I'd be glad to. I worked for the University of California for 37 years. I'm retired now, retired in 2019. But I went to work for them back in 1981, I think it was, and did various staff jobs along the way. But in the year 2004, my boss asked me um, to engage in a new project, which we were just starting there, and the project was called business resumption planning. That's business resumption is a word which in the early days was used as business continuity is used now, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Along the way, we, as Paul indicated, we developed a piece of software which has ultimately become Kuali Ready, and I want to share with you a number of the um, experiences, pitfalls, successes, failures that we experienced along the way. After I
Great.
finished 30 years at the Berkeley campus, the last 12 of which were working on business continuity, I then went to work for the what we call at the University of California the Office of the President, which is the system-wide office, overseeing all 10 UC campuses, one of which is Berkeley. And the five big medical centers, which we also own. And in that role, I continued on, coordinating business continuity across all of those campuses and med centers for another 7 years before I finally retired in 2019. So that's a pretty quick capsule of who I am and my experience. Paul, do you want to take it back over?
Yeah, thank you. So a lot of ground to cover here today, and we're all excited to hear about your experience, particularly in higher education. The world of emergency management and business continuity planning is vast, and there's a lot of variance from industry to industry. And one of the things that we found, of course, is higher education is unique. It has its own um, special things that need to be considered when you're creating and managing plans. Um, let's see, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Let's go over a quick agenda to let everybody know what we're going to cover here over the next 50 minutes or so. I'm going to do a super quick 3-slide introduction to the company, followed by some conversation with Paul. He'll be talking about the early days of business continuity planning, or as you say, Paul, continuity resumption. Is that right? Or
Business resumption planning.
business resumption planning, BRP. And then the evolution over the last couple of decades. We'll be talking about the top challenges that universities and colleges face today, and then Erica will be providing a quick, super high level demo of Kuali Ready so you guys can see what it's all about. And then we'll end with some Q&A. I didn't put a housekeeping slide on here, but I should mention that this webinar is being recorded. There is a Q&A feature in Zoom. So as you have questions, and I would encourage everyone to post questions that might pop into mine. I'll be watching that closely and we'll be sharing those questions with Paul as they come in. All right. The first thing that, as Paul mentioned, that we're going to talk about with Kuali, and we do this, in all of our conversations, is we like to really assert that Kuali was built and created by higher ed for higher education. And that begins with the Kuali Foundation in 2004, which Paul was a part of at the very beginning. The Kuali Foundation was a consortium of colleges and universities who decided that they wanted to build their own solutions for higher education. And it was quite successful. It grew quickly over the next 10 years, and the consortium created a variety of software, including continuity planning, but also research administration and financial management, and a couple of other tools as well. But around 2014, with the emergence of cloud-based software, we saw a demand not just among our consortium members, but in the broader higher education community for something a little more robust and something with a more aggressive roadmap. And the challenge during the foundation days was we had all of our partners building on-prem iterations or versions of their software. So it began to really fragment, and it made it hard to focus on a singular roadmap and really push our products forward in a unified direction. And so it was around 2014 that we made the shift from a nonprofit foundation to a private company, and Kuali.co was born. And since that time, we've grown exponentially. Things have really taken off. Today, we have over 220 institutions using Kuali software across their universities. And when I say software, we have 5 different solutions that we build for higher education. And I won't get into all of these, but we have solutions for IT in the form of no-code forms and workflows, and that really helps with the digital transformation of a university, accelerated digital transformation across campus. We have solutions for the provost's office and for the registrar for curriculum, catalog, and syllabus management. For research, a whole suite of different solutions for research administration that we have on the Kuali platform. And I mentioned financial management earlier as well. In this webinar, we'll be talking about Ready, our business continuity planning solution. Um, and so this slide is a reminder for me that Eric is going to do a demo. And so at this point, Paul, we're going to transition over to you and talk a little bit about your experience in history with Kuali Ready. So I'll stop sharing and you should have the floor now.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Well, my experience started back in the year 2004. I, at that time, was working as a project manager for one of the high-level administrators at Berkeley and running various performance improvement projects with the several thousand people who were under him. And I was on vacation in England with my wife in the summer of 2004 and got an email from my boss's administrative assistant, and she said, Paul, please confirm you're going to be back in the office on such and such a date. Ron wants to talk to you about your job. And Ron was my boss, our boss. Well, if you want to ruin a guy's vacation, that's a good way to do it. So it turned out that what he wanted to talk with me about was he wanted me to switch over to a different job. He wanted me to take a new position, which he was just in the process of creating, called Business Resumption Planner. And my first question was, what's business resumption? And he explained to me that he was a very forward-thinking guy, very in touch with um, management issues, both in the private and the public sector. He had come from a number of different high-level experiences, and he said that he explained to me what this was, basically disaster planning aimed at helping the university continue to operate or to get back in business if something like an earthquake, which is a big worry for us, strikes us down. So I asked him, well, is anybody else doing this? Other universities? And he said he really wasn't aware of anybody. It was, done in the corporate world, but he had never heard of another university doing it, but he thought it was a good idea to try. And so I kind of scratched my head and said, trying to ask myself, is this a career opportunity or is this a setup for failure? And so I agreed to take the job as long as he'd keep my former job open for 6 months in case I wanted to come back. Anyway, the rest is history, and I really did enjoy the job and sunk my teeth into it. And the first thing that I tried to do was investigate other universities. And indeed, as he had told me, I could not find a single university which is doing this type of work. So I got together with some of my fellow staff members who knew their way around campus and tried to invent something. And we did. We came up with a Microsoft Word document to help the. We decided that had the best place to do this kind of planning was on the level of departments. And we came up with a Microsoft Word document, which would format a set of questions which we would ask various departments. And I started off on that journey, meeting with departments all over campus and trying to convince them to join in the effort.
Let me ask you about that time. So I'm curious, were there, and I'm thinking about this in the context of the evolution of emergency management, right?
Mhm.
And the science and best practices that have kind of gone into that field. At the time, where was the field of emergency management back then? Were there emerging standards, existing standards? Were there conferences that people go to? How was in larger, beyond higher education, how were people thinking about continuity back then?
Okay, good question, Paul. The Berkeley hired its first emergency manager in the early 1990s. So in 2004, we had had an emergency manager for about 10 years. The field of emergency management universities was still in its infancy, though. There at that time was no national organization for university and college emergency managers. One developed in 2005, 2006. Uh, Under the auspices of a couple of really far-sighted emergency managers from UW and University of Washington and the University of Oregon.
Mm.
And they called together their fellow emergency managers around the country and and tagged onto the IAEM, the International Association of Emergency Managers, which is a very big organization, public and private sector emergency managers from all over the world, really. And they convinced the IAEM to give the university and colleges emergency managers a forum. And to this day, that continues. At the annual IAEM conference, Paul mentioned he had been to one recently. There is an adjunct happening, usually the day before the main conference, of the university and colleges. They used to call it the caucus. I'm not sure what it's called these days. But
Yeah.
it is, in my mind, the best gathering of university and college emergency managers that there is. I used to go to it every year before I retired. I would never miss it. Now,
I
interesting,
share that I
yeah,
was really impressed
yeah,
with the audience that was there, the topics that were covered, and as I mentioned earlier, how unique and different
hmm,
emergency management and continuity planning is for people who work within the field of higher education, because there's so many unique issues and
right,
things happening in higher education right now. So if anyone's curious about that caucus, you can shoot me a message here in the chat, or Eric will share his contact information at the end. We can get you in touch with the people who organize that conference. It's a great thing to get involved with.
yeah. Now, interestingly enough, my first job after I moved into what was then called the business resumption job was to explain to the campus's emergency manager how my task and his task were the same but different. And fortunately, he was a good guy, and we had a good relationship, and we worked out a good partnership. But the what really opened my eyes was in 2005, I believe it was. I attended my first of these caucuses at the IAEM meeting, and at that time, at least, this is the first or second time the university and colleges has had their own day. And they used to have each one of us stand up at the beginning and introduce ourselves, tell what our job was, etc. So one by one, we stood up, and I stood up. My turn came, and I said, "Well, I was the business resumption manager at UC Berkeley," and the room kind of went silent. And I took a minute to explain what business resumption manager meant. And the interesting thing was that the following year, there were a couple of other folks who introduced themselves as emergency managers and continuity planners, or emergency managers and resumption planners. And then the year after that, there were two or three more. And then the year after that, a couple more. And by the time 10 years had passed, most of the people in the room introduced themselves with a joint title. So that was kind of a capsule of how the field started. Started very, it caught on. It caught on because it was posing and answering an important question, which hadn't really been addressed very well at that point. Um, so as we got into it, as I said, I had some collaborators on the staff at Berkeley. I was a kind of a one-man department, but fortunately had some other staff people who joined in to help me. And we created a Microsoft Word document and started using that with different departments to create continuity plans. And eventually, I had a whole shelf of, physical shelf of loose leaf notebooks with departmental continuity plans in them. And finally, we came to realize that this effort was not going anywhere fast, that we really needed a better way to go about doing this. And that's when we landed on the idea of creating a piece of web software to accomplish this continuity planning. Fortunately, we were able to get a FEMA grant to pay for us to develop that software. FEMA gave us a grant on the condition that we develop a piece of software that we would ultimately share with other colleges and universities across the country.
Oh, how interesting. So
Yeah,
So
that's
Kuali
right.
Ready was really born from this government intervention that happened, I'm
It,
assuming kind of as a result of 9/11.
well, I can't say it was tied to 9/11, but certainly the field of emergency management and disaster planning really picked up after 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So let me ask you about those early days, because one of the things that we see often still to this day is a lot of institutions relying on Word documents or like a Google Doc that might be a shared doc between different stakeholders. There's a lot of
Mhm.
email and a lot of meetings still.
Mhm.
And so when you think back to that time where you had that shelf of loose leaf documents printed out, all of your
Mhm.
continuity plans, what was it about that system that wasn't working for you and really kind of prompted you that you needed software to kind of help manage the situation?
Well, one of the big things was that there was no way to relate one department's plan to the next department's plan. Um,
Mm,
for example, in continuity planning, we ask departments what their IT dependencies are, which IT applications are they really dependent upon to keep their core functions running, and we get different answers from different departments, but the same answers also across the board too. However, doing that plans on paper or Word documents or even shared Google documents, there's no really easy way to pull out the information. Well, how many departments really are dependent upon this particular application, which is served up by the central IT, and how do we prioritize? How do we help central IT prioritize what applications to put their recovery efforts into first? And
mhm.
that was one of the big things which bedeviled us. Just that and departments also didn't realize what other departments, even departments in their own sector of the campus, in their own college, were saying. And
Mm.
that was also a big limitation because many of the problems, of course, are shared, but they didn't know that they were shared. And coming up with shared solutions is hard when you don't even know you're sharing the problem. So it
Yeah.
was really a limited approach, and it's really helped by having a database software underlying the planning project.
Well, I would imagine also, and I think we'll get into this more later, but this is a new idea and it's a new task that you're asking stakeholders to participate in. What was it like in those early days trying to sell the dream across the campus, across the university?
Well, of course, it was a hard sell.
Yeah.
Every, everybody is overwhelmed by their daily job. Everybody is busy up to the top of their head trying to do what they need to do to keep in their job, and to lay another task on top of people is difficult. And especially universities are like many organizations. You're trying to do things efficiently with it and with as few staff as they can manage to get away with, and that means we're all overloaded. So one of the techniques that we developed was to try to work our way in through the back door. In
Mm,
other words, well, of course, first of all, we tried to prioritize. What are the departments which we really think we should focus on first, which are most important to keeping the campus operating? By the way, it took us about a year or two, but we started using the phrase business continuity instead of business resumption, because the underlying concept in business resumption was that the campus would stop operating and we'd have to get it running again. Well, we decided it really would be better to plan not to have the campus stop operating, to continue its operations despite what happens. And so we started using the phrase business continuity, and the phrase business resumption has basically faded into history. But one approach which I tried, which had some limited success, was to, and this applies, I think, to a lot of business continuity planning, try to find a back door. First of all, I found that it was really helpful to have friends. Um, I had been on the campus at that point for about 20 years, and had friends all around on the staff, and that was very important, because they answer your phone calls, they meet with you, and they talk with you, and they receive you. Um, the and I also found it helpful not to walk in and say, "I want to help you create a business continuity plan." Um, what I found really useful was to walk in and start asking questions, to enable them to do a lot of the talking and tell me what their issues were.
So this is something I definitely want to get more into because we hear this all the time, right? From people who are charged with creating and maintaining continuity plans. Oftentimes it can be dozens and dozens, if not, well over 100 different plans, but they don't always have the authority to really, and they're working with stakeholders who have a lot of authority on campus. And
Mhm.
so I want to get into more about any tips and tricks that you might have for developing those relationships and trying to get stakeholder buy-in across campus. But I know you shared with me before we started, you have a few slides that kind of step through the history
Mhm.
of Kuali Ready. Did we cover that, or is that something that you wanted to
No, I
share?
could, yeah, I
I
want to
think it
cover
could be
that.
really
Yeah.
interesting.
Let me do that quickly here. Let me share my screen. And
There we go.
okay. Okay, this is a very quick synopsis of the history of the software. The very first version of the software we created we launched that in 2005, and we called it Restarting Berkeley. And this again harks back to that concept of business resumption. The scenario that we were having in our minds at that time was, of course, was earthquake. Berkeley's in a very serious earthquake zone, right across the bay from San Francisco, and that's our big fear at Berkeley was earthquake. Nobody in those days talked about pandemics. It turned out to be the pandemic which took us down. But so we called it Restarting Berkeley, which is an odd name, but we struggled. And then a couple of years ago, a couple of years later, rather, we changed the name and we also introduced a new version with some improvements, and we called it the Berkeley Continuity Planning Tool, which again is a mouthful. Um, And that also was restricted only to the Berkeley campus. Now, a year later, in 2008, our system-wide office took a look at what we we're doing on the Berkeley campus and asked us if we could develop that into an effort which could spread across the entire UC system. And we did that, but in order to do that, we had to rewrite a good deal of the software and make it much more flexible and adaptable to different campuses and also to medical centers.
Can I
Um,
ask you about that moment? What was happening across the UC system that prompted that initiative?
We were very fortunate. We had a chief risk officer in our office of the president. That's the system-wide office. She had purview over the entire university, and one of her jobs is to minimize and manage risk. And she saw business continuity planning as a big step in that direction. Um,
Hmm.
so I demoed for her what we were doing, and we had several discussions. And then finally, she decided to put her muscle behind spreading it across the entire system. And and very happily, she also put some money behind it. She funded a continuity planner position at each of the campuses and medical centers, and that continues to this day. So that we have at each of our campuses and med centers a dedicated business continuity planner, um, and funded by our central office of the president. So we were very fortunate in that regard. And I know that not every campus is in every university or college is quite so lucky in that regard. And I know it's a problem, but we were very fortunate. So that was how that developed and what put the impetus behind it, Paul.
Got it. Okay. All right. And so as we continue, the foundation began to offer up Ready. So talk to me about the transition, how you all got involved with the Quality Foundation.
Sure. Well, we were involved with the Kuali Foundation in other ways. Principally, our IT department, our chief information officer, the head of IT, was on the board of directors of the Kuali Foundation, and he saw our UC Ready application as a good candidate to spread to other universities and colleges. And So he discussed with the Kuali Foundation whether they would, want to adopt our software, and they looked at it and decided that they did. And that was a fortunate time for us too, because we were running out of money to develop it. We're, of course, an educational institution, not a software company. And we had already produced 3 different versions of it. And we really didn't have a source of money to produce any more versions. So we were happy to have the Kuali Foundation take it over. And so we donated it to them for free, again, in line with our promise to FEMA that we would ultimately make this available to other campuses. By the way, we had already at that point for a couple of years been offering our tool to any other campuses who wanted, any other universities who wanted it, but we were only able to share it as a total software code package. In other words, they would have to mount it on their own campus servers and
Right.
get it running themselves. We offered support as much as we could, but basically it was a very awkward situation. We gave it to about 150 universities in that way. I only ultimately was aware of 2 who ultimately got it installed and running. So Kuali offered us a big step forward in that too, because they were going to offer it software as a service and host it themselves and make it much easier for campuses to adopt it. So
Right.
it was a win-win all around. I actually worked for the Kuali Foundation for a couple of years on a part-time basis. They paid half my salary at Berkeley, so I could devote half my time to them. And I worked with them as chair of what they called the Kuali Ready Functional Council, which was a group of staff members, representatives from 10 different campuses who ultimately used Kuali Ready. And we were the governing body which decided upon improvements and other matters.
Right. And I should say that lives on today in another form, but that continues. And one of the things Eric will get to in his portion is talking about our community circles that we have. So yeah, the foundation certainly kept you busy because, as I understand it, Ready was one of the more popular parts of or solutions offered by the Kuali Foundation. It grew very quickly, and I think to this day, well, I know Ready continues to be our most popular solution that we have at Kuali across all our different products. And then, of course, you get to the classic version. We'll talk a little bit about the difference between classic and next generation. But in 2014, we launched Kuali the company, software as a solution, cloud-based, Kuali Ready. And that was built on a code base and was the dominant version, right, of Kuali Ready.
Yeah,
Um,
that. Mhm.
yeah, up until about last year. And at that point, we introduced the Kuali Platform. And Kuali Ready was the first product to make the transition onto the Kuali platform. The Kuali platform, and I won't get into the weeds on this, it's just a unified code base that allows us to develop all our different software solutions in the same environment. And that has a huge advantage in that oftentimes we find that we build something for, say, our research solution, and we find that it's a useful capability for our other solutions as well. So we can build something once and deploy it 4 different times across our platform products. Um, all right. Well, thank you for sharing that history. Go ahead.
Yeah, so very quickly, Paul, let me just, I'm just going to show the folks just a quick glimpse of each of our generations here. This is what the homepage, the landing page of our original application looked like, restarting Berkeley. Whoops. That became the Berkeley Continuity Planning Tool. Same application with a number of improvements, but basically a next generation of that tool.
I love
And it became,
restarting Berkeley, by the way. Did you guys have like a standing joke about unplugging it and plugging it back in to see if it would?
I have heard that. We'll leave that be.
Great.
This is the 3rd version, UC Ready. Across we had much more flexible to serve all of the campuses and med centers in the University of California. And then finally, this was what Kuali Ready looked like. it was much even more flexible to allow different institutions to plug in their logos, their name for the tool, the name of their institution, and lots of particulars about that. And so those are just quick glimpses of the history there.
Awesome. Thank you. So that's a little bit about the history and how we got to where we are today. And I'm excited for Eric to share the next generation of Kuali Ready with you so we can get your reaction to that. Before we do, though, there was a couple issues that there are a couple issues that always seem to come to surface whenever we talk to anybody in the field of emergency management or tasked with continuity planning. And one is prioritizing continuity planning. Now we are seeing more um, governmental involvement, right? Some more regulations and requirements for public universities in particular to have continuity plans in place. And so that is helping continuity planners, right? It's giving them more reason or authority to get that initiative started. But oftentimes, it's something that has to be done, but it's not always thought of as something that is an evergreen or ongoing project. Um, I've seen a lot of folks, they tend to think of continuity planning as something you can do once and then that project is done, like you can check it off the list. Whereas what I've learned is that a plan is a living document because as you have staff turnover and responsibilities change, somebody who might be responsible for a specific action in a plan may have moved on, and you have to make sure that whoever comes in to fill that role or responsibility is put into the plan. So this is a long-winded question, but what I'm asking is how, so you mentioned earlier having executive level support for continuity planning, but how can folks who are responsible for continuity planning, particularly those maybe a little farther down in the authority complex, how can what are some tips you might have for them to, for example, convince their leadership that they need to invest in continuity planning software versus just using a Google Doc or a Word doc?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first thing which I would say is limit your expectations. The leadership and management on campuses have lots of things on their minds, and our particular project, if we're lucky, only occupies a tiny space of those minds. So we really have to, and this is a mistake I made in the very beginning. I, in the very beginning, would have stated our goal as to have every department on campus do a continuity plan. Now we counted and came up with somewhere in the number of 400 departments on the campus.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And of course, so I'd go home frustrated every day and show up frustrated every morning. And eventually, we learn to temper our expectations and to learn to prioritize, to identify which departments are the most important ones to be ready when disaster strikes, and to keep that infrastructure running, which is so important for the other departments to keep their own functions happening. Now, we did try to engage upper management. But our engagement of upper management was more in the line of trying to make them aware of what we were doing and why we were doing it in every way we could. At Berkeley, for example, every year the campus in a weekend before classes start in August, they have what's called a deans and chairs meeting. And it lasts for Saturday and Sunday. And the deans and chairs from all over campus get together and with the provost and his staff, and they go over all sorts of stuff. Well, one year we got them to invite us to their deans and chairs, and we put on a presentation about that. And we had probably the 50th most powerful people in the campus in one room hearing us out. What do we accomplish? Well, they know we exist. They know what we're trying to do. We also had our provost was one of our big supporters. Provost, of course, is the academic head of the campus. So the deans all report to him or her. And one year, the provost wrote a email to all of the deans and chairs of the campus promoting our effort at continuity planning and putting his support behind it. And that was important too, but it didn't get us many recruits. We never saw much action as a result of that, but at least it kept our name out there. And as I said earlier, what I found was most useful was a backdoor approach. Get in there and don't necessarily talk to the chair or the dean or the director of the department right away. Talk to the his or her chief staff person or someone else in the department who's a key staff person, and go in there, ask them questions, what issues they're facing, what would happen if they they lost their IT, for example, what would happen if their building burned, how would they cope, and don't try to structure it, just let them talk. And we found people love to talk about that, and got them thinking, and then eventually introduced the concept of a continuity plan, and then we'd sometimes be able to get them to really dive in and engage in a serious way. But the idea is prioritize. The idea is don't expect people to do what you want to do because you want them to do it. You have to motivate them. Tell them
Yeah.
stories. Get a collection of stories because stories engage people.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that is actually a great recommendation. While Eric and I were at the IAEM conference at the University and College Caucus, someone mentioned that I think a flood led to a power loss, but in their research department, there had been an ongoing research project that I think was more than 20 years old that got lost as a result of this interruption. And so that was 20 years worth of research just out the window, which impacts funding because now the grant couldn't be renewed as a result.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's a good story. We hear oftentimes that a lot of research departments have a hard time getting on board with continuity plans. So I appreciate that advice as well. I'm noticing the time, Paul, and we have so many stories and there's so much good background that you have, but we're really eager to get your thoughts on the next generation of Kuali Ready. So what I thought we'd do now is shift over to Eric's portion where he can jump in and give us a high-level demo of how the software works.
Thanks, Paul. And Paul, thanks, Paul's. Let me share my screen here really quick here. As I'm doing that, I did everything wrong. Just so you know, for people that don't know me, I did continuity for about 4 years at the previous university I worked at, and my expectations were also high. So because of that, I did those things that Paul did and tried to do all the plans all at once. So doing it a little by little is definitely the way to go. This is our next generation of Kuali. This has been in the works for such a long time. We had so many requests over the years asking for certain functionality, and now they get those things in this new platform. Try not to pay attention to all these other apps here because I don't want to get in the weeds here, but this is beyond continuity. You want to add something to your department, something like an incident report, or you can create those and you can keep all that in-house on the same platform. But for the Ready product, it is a product, so you don't have to build anything out. It's given to you. It's an out-of-the-box thing, and so when you click into the product. What you're looking at here is what Paul Dimond had stacks of on his shelf, and how he was managing it was three ring binders. This is where you can see exactly all the plans that you have, what status they're in, who's doing what. It looks like, there's this one right here is an error state, and there's something going on here. I'd probably want to investigate that. One of the biggest things with continuity planning is managing the continuity plans themselves. As you start to get more and more plans in the system, how do you stay on top of that, knowing that business continuity may not be your only role? It might be one of the 10 other things that you do for that college or university. So having visibility into where this plan is, who's completed it, why is it sitting on this person's desk, like this one, the accountancy department, why is it here for 4 months? What's going on, right? And all those things are can be, frustrations, and it can slow the process. But what's nice about this is, for all the visual people, what we just looked at, we have the visuals for you, so you can drill down into all those things that I was just showing you, right? So if I say, oh, there's an error state here, what is going on with that plan? So I would pull up that plan and I would say, okay, well, let me see. It says that there's an error state, but I need to investigate a little bit more. So I would pull it up. And with that, I would say, okay, it looks like there was an error on February 26th at 9:40 a.m. So I know exactly when that error happened. So I would go and I would look at that workflow status and I would say, well, what happened? Well, I know here, all the way down here, it got submitted February 20th of 2024. A task was completed. It got reassigned a whole bunch of times. And then we got to this step, and it looks like there's no users in this department chair role. So that means someone probably left, like Paul was saying, that people come and go from your institution, your single sign-on, and said, hey, this person's no longer in the system. And so very quickly, instead of me trying to find the person, send them an email, tell them, hey, you're the new person for this, I can just quickly reassign this. And I'm just going to put my name in here because this is our system that we're connected to. And then there we have to log this. So I would say, tag, you're it. It'll probably be something more formal. And then I'd reassign it. And then now it's been reassigned to myself. Now there is an approval step that has now been assigned to me. So that process will continue. If let's say I ignore this for a little while, you can also hit resend notification. And we like to call this the hammer. This is where you can send that as many times as you want. So the biggest thing in moving to the platform is knowing where your plan is, at what stage it's at, and how complete it is. Because even with the previous version that we had, people would fill out plans or say they were complete when they were not. And since you're not reviewing a continuity plan every week, months could go by until you figure out, wait a minute, there's these 3 sections you did not fill out. And so this gives you, that transparency to see everything in here. Now let me close out of that. I'm going to go into the continuity plan itself. And what's nice about this no-code platform is it's all a drag and drop. So what customers and people that are brand new come in, they say, hey, we don't like this section, or we want to change this up, or we don't like the wording. And so basically they do that very quickly. So if I wanted to add something to this continuity plan, this is what it actually looks like. These are all the things that we capture: your buildings, your contacts, your critical functions. We talked about information technology a lot on there, so I'm going to go into that section. We're asking things like, what are your centralized applications? Do you have any? Yes, we do. What centralized application is that? Well, we have Banner. What's the level of criticality? It's a critical 2. What's the recovery time objective for that? Well, we're going to need that for 24 to 48 hours. Do you have another one? Sure, let's add another, and let's just keep going with filling out the plan.
So one question that comes up often, Eric, is because a lot of stakeholders may not know what these things are, right?
Yeah.
They don't work in emergency management and they don't do business continuity plans. So what is recovery time? Can you explain that to me? And so that's a question we get a lot. Can you cover like how this can really be customized in a way that makes sense to the stakeholders?
Yeah, because every stakeholder may not understand business continuity, but they understand that how their department works and what's most critical. If you notice here under recovery time, there's an actual little question mark here. If I mouse over this, it says, realistically, how quickly do you need this application restarted to continue to provide service? And this was added in just for that reason right there, Paul. That, hey, what is this recovery time objective? And if I go in under the preview here, and this is what I call under the hood, where your configuring this how you want it. But if I go to that section under critical functions, under IT, sorry. Let me go down here to IT and show you. Basically what's happening is, and you can do this for any section, but you see here, this is where that is. So if I was to click into this recovery time, you can see that on the right-hand side is all of the basically how that gadget works, right? This is a lookup tool. It's an integration. We do integrations with systems as long as it's a RESTful API, talk to and from systems. But basically what we did here, we said, hey, we want to make this. This is just this little toggle right here. So if I took that off, that would go away. But when I say, hey, this is the description for it, we get to customize that, whatever that you want that message to be. We give you standard ones, and they're all throughout the continuity plan itself, but you get to add more things. If you think there's other things that need a little bit more description, you just click on that gadget. Maybe for level of criticality, you want to do the same thing. You want to put a descriptive text that goes there, and then maybe you want to say something like, you have to check one of these, right? And so I can say like check one now. That's pretty straightforward, right? And then I can also just so it'll come up as a grayed out text to say check one now, or I can put it as a help bubble, and then they just mouse over it and it tells them what to do. So this is your guidance. This guides the people through the continuity plan itself, so that you as an admin or administrator are not holding everybody's hand along the way and answering a ton of emails. Well, what does this mean? Well, what does that mean? Really, if you understand how your department works and you have guidance within this, you can easily create a plan and get that, in a review process.
So, and I think you covered this, Eric, but that preview toggle at the top, I always thought that was neat, because this is a little abstract with the gadgets and the gadget settings and dragging things around. But if I want to see what it looks like for the stakeholders, there's a stakeholder view too with the preview mode.
Yeah. So what's pretty cool with this is as you're working on this, maybe you want to share this with somebody else to get eyes on it as you're, hey, I'm thinking about changing something on here. You can quickly share this with other folks within your organization as well, using this share button.
So,
And go ahead.
So just lay of the land. So we've got just kind of review for my benefit, and I think the audience too. When you first log in, you can see all your plans, the status of all your plans, where they are, who they might be stuck with, or where the next step is. You've
Yep.
got a dashboard view, color coded, so you can say these are, these have errors, these are in progress, these are complete. And then if you need to change the forms that are used for plans, that's this form builder tool you're showing here that has the preview option. Talk to us about like how it all works though, because it's one thing to create a form that people fill out. How do I make sure the right people get the right forms at the right times?
Yeah, so there's usually an admin or a few admins that are running this project, right? And so basically, they're the ones that have to start this thing. They're gonna have to send something out. So under the Documents tab, they literally would say new right here, and then they would assign somebody, a plan manager, to that plan. And basically, what happens is, I'm just going to use myself as an example here, as a person that's going to be assigned, and there I am.
Oh, and by the way,
Probably
that's all integrated with SSO, right? So the
correct.
integration that we have, he mentioned this earlier, but we can bring in your buildings, we can bring in your departments, we can bring in your faculty list, right? And have all that sync with your existing systems, right? So you're not doing data uploads, it's real-time sync using the API between Ready and your existing systems.
Correct. And once that has been done, once that got sent out, and I'm going to get an email with my institution's logo, giving me directions on what I need to do, and that's all done here in the workflow. So this is where you our team and yours figure out what is your business process. what does it look like when a plan gets assigned? Who's the ones filling it out? Who's approving those plans? And then who's reviewing those plans? So this is once again, this is an out of the box thing that you get. It's one of those things where if you like this workflow, you just change up a few things, groups, users on the back end, and start to use it. Or you can start to take things out and add things in here. So just to really quick to show you how easy it is to do this, it's another drag and drop system, right? So let's say I want to add a notification at the end of this workflow, right? And at the end of this workflow, I want to call this I don't know, let's call this plan complete, right?
And I'm not sure it came through in the Zoom, Eric, but for those who might have missed it, all the items where it says add steps on the left, that window, you can grab some, think of that as like a toolbox. You can grab something out of there and drag it into anywhere inside this workflow and things will move around. So if you try it again, Eric, but like slower,
Oh,
people can
okay.
see.
Did it
Yeah,
go?
because
It's
it
why I went
just,
too fast.
from our point of view, it just like materialized immediately. But if you
It was
just
like
drag
magic.
something and you don't have to, yeah, just kind of like drag it in between and you can see how everything rearranges in the workflow,
Okay, you're
right? So
seeing
maybe
that,
like put it in between a couple of things.
seeing how it's going in between them.
No. Yeah,
Oh,
so
so
you,
it's
I think you have to like stop for a second.
stop share.
No, no, like just stop moving around. There you go. All right, so we're starting to get it. It's coming in. It's just
Oh, I see.
all right,
See,
this is probably for my benefit more than anything, but you can see where it's showing you can insert these
yep.
steps inside the workflow. Thanks, Eric. Sorry.
Yeah. And this is just me adding another step on here. I don't have know how to do any coding or anything. I call it plan complete. I want it to be as person that's specified on the continuity plan itself. I'm going to choose, it's going to be the submitter, the person that's submitting this. In the email subject, it's going to, you can have whatever you want in there, but I'm just going to say, plan complete, congrats on the actual email. And then I'm going to attach a PDF of that plan so they can have that physical plan. And then I just click out of it, and now I've quickly added another, in a step at the end of this business process that says, "Hey, plan's been completed." We send back a PDF to them so they can keep that as well if they need to pull a hard copy for whatever reason. So it
So
is this workflow that gives that visibility into where the plan is, what it's doing, how much of it's been filled out, because at every step of the way we're this is being configured. So the IT review section, um, basically I'm saying, hey, IT is going to review this if they answer any IT questions, because that's IT, that's all they really care about. Let's be honest, IT stuff, right? And so
yeah.
we're going to go through and I'm going to hide everything on that continuity plan. I'm going to hide everything except for I'm going to give them editing rights over all of the anything that has to do with DR, disaster recovery, workstation
So
servers.
this is one thing I love about Ready, and we got to wrap up here because we're just about at the bottom of the hour. But the ability to make the task as small as it needs to be
Hmm.
for your stakeholders. So, when you go to the doctor and they give you a form to fill out when you check in, and, there's 5 pages. First of all, a lot of that with Ready is going to auto insert because of the data integration, but there's always that section at the bottom that says for office use only. In this case, there's no reason for the person to see that, so we're just not going to show it. And so this IT example is a good example of that. First of all, there's an if-then statement. So
Hmm.
if the user inputs a certain data point, then that triggers a new branch in the workflow, and then it's sent to the IT group. And IT says, oh, I see that this involves software on our network, right? And so they
Yep.
have a series of questions they have to answer, but they don't see all the other stuff. They only see the bits that are relevant to them. And so the task becomes a lot smaller for
It
them,
does.
which means that they're more likely to do it quickly, right? And get it done fast. So, and then finally, the last step here, once you've got that workflow built, you've got a
Yep.
simulator.
You got to simulate I won't run through the whole thing, but it only has you fill out the sections that need the workflow to continue. So it would want you to do these things. What's nice about this is once you figure out your business process, people don't get emailed and data doesn't change. Like if you have an integration or whatever, this is just a simulator to make sure you have the correct workflow and everyone that's involved is a part of that process. And you would just continue and you would just go and it would just keep going. And it's like, hey, workflow can't continue. There's an issue here. So there's no valid users. Remember that valid user that I showed you in that error state? That's what why it's giving this.
So this
Um,
saves a ton of time
yeah.
because, the way it used to be done is you would create a workflow, right? And then hope it was all set up correctly. And then you would find out from someone that something doesn't work or somebody didn't get the notification that they expected. So this allows you to actually run through the entire process from soup to nuts to make sure that every single component works before you publish it and make it live.
And last but not
Okay.
least, I just want to show the action. This is how we stay collaborative. So on when I log into the system, I have my action list. Remember, I signed myself to be the plan manager. That's this task right here. So basically, I would go into that task and it would say, "Oh, I have a task," and then it says, "Hey, as a plan manager, you need to assign a plan editor. That could be someone that's helping me, or if it's like I'm doing it all on my own, I'll just assign myself." And so that's as these tasks are given, that's how you stay collaborative and that's how you get your plans done and out for review so that you can start becoming more resilient.
All right.
I would like to interject something here if I could, guys. Eric has really gotten us into the weeds on the process here, but I would like to take it up a notch and go back to the idea which Paul and Eric I've heard keep saying that Kuali Ready is the only continuity planning tool designed by higher ed for higher ed. And I think that there's a real advantage to that um, when during my entire career, a lot of the good ideas I had for what's the next step in developing, what's the next thing we want to build into this software, how do we modify it, came from the users. There were those administrators at the different campuses who were using it day by day. And Kuali Ready is the only continuity planning application specifically designed for higher ed. You have guys like Paul and Eric who are energetically every day, all day, every day, figuring out how to make this software a success. And what I would encourage anybody who's using the software to do is get in communication whenever you need to with the folks from Kuali and let them know what your issues are, let them know what the problems are, let them know what you're experiencing, so that this can continue. It's the only. I've also had experience with other big software companies who produce big software products which can be adapted to higher ed. You don't get the same level of attention. They don't understand your problems as well, and they don't respond as well. They'll listen to you, but they won't understand, and they won't necessarily come up with their own ideas. That's not the case with Kuali. So I would just want to point that out.
I appreciate that, Paul. Thank you. And that's actually a good transition into one of the questions that came in from Greg, who asked if Kuali sponsors or endorses a higher education business continuity professional network. And we don't, but we have something really close with our community circles and our quarterly community calls. And I'm putting your contact information here, Eric, because
Sure.
it's a twofer, right? We want to make sure people have somebody they can reach out to, but also if you're interested in joining one of those community circles or quarterly community calls, they're great. And it's not everything about Kuali. I mean, certainly that's a big part of what we talk about, but it is a collection of people who are business continuity planners and responsible for creating business continuity plans. And they cover a lot of ground. It's a very active group. Always a really interesting conversation whenever we have those calls. I think last one we did, we had about 70 people, Eric.
Yeah, every time we have a community calls between 50 and 70 institutions that join that call and really just talk about the challenges. If one institution's doing something really well or they've created some process that's working really well with them, they can share that with the group and then just like in emergency management, we beg, borrow, and steal everything because if someone's doing something and it's working, why would I not try to do that to make my job a little easier? So those community calls are, every 3 months, always 50 to 70 institutions on those.
Excellent. Yeah. So connect with Eric and we can get you guys dialed in. You don't have to be a customer. We love to have guests show up to those calls as well. Well, before we end, and I know we're over time, so I appreciate everybody sticking around. This is also going up on our YouTube channel, so people can watch in 2x speed if they want to get the fast forward version. But Paul, I'm curious, uh, and you got a more deep dive demo of the next generation of Ready with Eric last week. I'm curious, like, what your top three takeaways might be, things that you noticed about the new version of Ready that you think are particularly interesting.
Yeah, I was, as I think I said, I think the technology of this new Kuali platform is really impressive, and I think of the new features which really caught my eye. Number one is the ability to do integrations with other database systems on campus. You mentioned your faculty list, your IT application list. The ability to pull in to integrate with those other databases outside of Ready for your purposes is impressive. We always struggle with that at UC, and it was it was more often a case of we can't do that rather than we were able to do that. But I think you've got gone a long way to conquering that problem of integrating with other databases. Also, the tracking feature is really impressive. The I really caught my eye on that one, and the reports, the ability to report in different fashions is also really impressive. Basically, it looks to me, now that I'm seeing the new generation of Ready, that the platform, the Kuali platform that you've built it now on, has solved a lot of the problems which used to plague us as we were writing a custom application and needed to build all these things into it custom wise. You've got them in the platform, and now you can concentrate on designing a proper continuity planning application without worrying about all the infrastructure stuff.
Well, I love to hear it, and I hope you can see that your legacy lives on. This is definitely something
Mhm.
the company's very passionate about. It's a need that, as long as we have colleges and universities, there's going to be a need for continuity planning. Um, and yeah, we're just really proud to be helping universities along in that mission. So I'll
And
wrap.
if I can add one more thing, Paul, that the big event which I think encouraged a lot of people to think that way was, of course, the pandemic.
Right.
It finally happened. Something finally shut us down,
Yeah.
and we weren't ready for it. There's all sorts of stories out there, but
It's important to be ready, hence the name. And that is aside was a huge, we saw a huge uptick in interest in our continuity planning software after the pandemic. It was a yeah, big moment for everybody in higher education. Well, Paul, thank you so much for being generous with your time, sharing the really interesting history of continuity planning in higher education and the evolution of Ready, and for sharing your reflections on our next generation solution. Again, folks, if you have any questions, would like a deeper dive demo into the product, I know there's probably a lot of questions that you had that we didn't get to. Eric does an amazing demo. He's not just an account executive, he's more of a consultant and asks a lot of really deep probing questions, can offer a lot of tips on how you can tackle continuity planning at your campus. And so with that, we'll end. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time. I'll be sending out a link to this video recording shortly. So if you'd like to share it with your peers, you can. Uh, yeah, I'll stop there and we'll wrap up. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
thank you all.
Bye.